Alright, so I had a comment wondering about different types of ammunition on the AR-15 again. More specifically, like, yes, he gets it, like the 55 is awesome and all, but wouldn't like a 77 and an 8.55 be better? Alright, so let's go over that. Now, in M193, you're looking at a bullet length of .76. 8.55, 906. 262, 994. Now, one thing I want to cover is he said non-8.55. I'm assuming he means just because it's been demilled ammo and made back into ammunition. In case he's talking about just running a 62 grain projectile over your 8.55, you want to run the 8.55 because that has a steel slug in the end. Steel weighs less than lead, so you'll get a longer projectile at the same weight. If you have a longer projectile at the same weight, that projectile is going to have a higher BC. So an 8.55 projectile will be better than just an FMJ 62 grain projectile because an FMJ 62 grain projectile is going to be shorter, but it'll be the same amount of weight, so it's going to have less of a BC. That's why a lot of times you'll run steel or something that's lighter than lead inside of your projectile to increase the length. Alright, so one of his questions was, well, if it yaws, won't the 8.55 or the 2.62, I'm adding the 2.62 in there because I'm just going to cover that because I'll have to do a separate video on that, have a greater wounding capacity because it's a longer projectile? Yeah, most definitely. Your M193, you're looking at 3/4 of an inch. Your 8.55 and your 2.62, you're looking at damn near an inch. 0.9. So, damn near an inch. So yes, if they were turned sideways, the 8.55 and the 2.62 would definitely cause more damage. Well, what about kinetic energy? Now understand, when I did my ballistic charts, it's for these rifles. Now I did put the 2.62 in a 20-inch rifle, but I can't really play with those numbers too much because always if I forget to flip them back to what they're supposed to be, my ballistic data is going to be all screwed up. So, I mean, technically the 8.55 does have a disadvantage, but does it really matter? I mean, everyone runs 16 or 14.5-inch barrels like this one anyway, so that's what you're going to shoot 8.55 out of, so it kind of makes sense to look at the ballistics in a 14.5-inch barrel. Now, with your 2.62, obviously that's going to be out of a 20-inch barrel, so it makes sense to pull ballistic numbers from a 20-inch barrel. And I strongly recommend shooting M193 if you're going to go that route out of a 20-inch barrel, which the reasons we'll get into, so it makes sense to pull the numbers out of there. Now, obviously, every single ballistic calculator is going to spit something out slightly different, and every time you look this up on the internet, it's going to be slightly different. Like, there's a couple of viral, like, photos on Google that have been there for, like, years. I tried to figure out how they came to their numbers by plugging in different information in my ballistic calculator. I can't come to it. So this information comes from Seeker Pro, or sure, I'll just take a little screenshot and I'll show you what the app looks like. I found that app is pretty accurate. When I've used it on other things like my Profit and on this, like I made the range card off of there, it came out absolutely perfect. So I trust those numbers. Are they 100% guaranteed correct? No. There can be a variance. So, with kinetic energy, at 100 yards, your M193, you're looking at 1040. Your 8.55, you're looking at 1020. Your 2.62, you're looking at 1076. 200 yards, M193, 834. Your 8.55, you're looking at 823. And then it was either 44 or 94. Not really sure what I wrote there. Then at 300 yards, 659, 655, 732, 400 yards, 519, 517, 594. So what can we gather from all of this? Yes, if the 8.55 or the 2.62 turns sideways, it will in fact carve a larger wound cavity. The 8.55 and the 2.62 do in fact bring more kinetic energy on target. However, look at the difference. Less than a 1/4 inch of a bigger wound cavity. So that would mean you would have to be inside of your intended target by a 1/4 inch for that little bit of a difference to actually make a difference. Kinetic energy? Dude, it looks the same. I mean, yes, these clearly do have more kinetic energy, but By how much? Barely any at all. Like, they really don't bring much more to the table. And the fact that they don't bring much more to the table allows me to pick another advantage over the ballistic advantage. With your M193, out of a 20-inch barrel, it will get to the target quicker, it will drop less, and inside of 300 yards, your M193 is pretty freaking devastating because of the velocity it brings to the table. Because you're not just looking at bullet size. When you're above 2,200 feet per second, it moves enough material out of the way to where it causes damage, not just directly in front of the bullet, but around the bullet too. So you might have a wound cavity the size of a pop can going through, instead of, a .224 wound cavity. That's where the whole hydraulic effect, the tumbling and yawing all comes into play. So for me, it's more beneficial to me to run a 55 grain out of a 20-inch barrel like a M16 style, but there's huge disadvantages to it. Your M16A2 came with a 62 grain projectile, so if you have a BDC drum, which unless you built like a national match rifle like this, you do, so it's already got range marked out on it, your range isn't going to work. It'll get you close, especially inside of 300 yards. You probably won't even notice a difference. But for very dialed in shots, I had to put a range card on my stock, and then I just know that this is in half MOA increments, so I go to my range card, I go to the range, then I dial it in, then I'm point of aim, point of impact. With your M855, I am not able to check this. For example, on your M16A2s, these drums, they weren't just a BDC drum. They were also calibrated in a very specific MOA. If it says 3.6, that is one MOA. If it says 3.8, that's half MOA. Or no, I said that backwards. 3.6 is half MOA, and 3.8, that's a full MOA per click. So when I had my A2, my Bushmaster, I ran ballistic calculators and I checked it against the M855 and it was spot on. It was exactly the amount of come up you would need for different ranges. This isn't in a specific MOA or anything like that. This is just a BDC. So you just turn it to the range you want to shoot, and then your point of aim, point of impact. I obviously got to have a 600 yard range to test all of this. But looking at how accurate the A2 versions were, I'm assuming that's spot on. Maybe it's not, but, somebody would have complained about it by now if it's not. So the big advantage of M855 is if you have some sort of military sighting system, it's calibrated for that round. Yeah, your 77s and your 55s will probably be close enough to where inside of 300 yards it wouldn't make a difference. I just like to have my shit match up. I just do. So, if I have some sort of military sighting system, I run 855. Otherwise, the little bit of ballistic advantage 855 and 262 gives me, it's not worth it over the advantages the M193 gives me within how quickly it gets to the target and how little bit of drop it has. Like, here's some targets right here. Yeah, the drop is pretty negligible, but when you're talking about this much, that can be the difference between a hit or a miss. I would rather just have it get to the target faster and have less drop, and I'll take the slight disadvantages over, I guess you'd call it knockdown power, over the 262 or the 855, because I know just hitting the target, period, is more important than bringing a little bit of ballistic advantage to the table. I guarantee an M193 is going to be far more effective hitting the target than either of these two rounds will be going into the dirt. I have the highest likelihood, probability, advantages with the M193. Way more than the 5.56 855 and the 262. So I want the advantages of a higher likelihood of impacting my target over, 20 foot-pounds of kinetic energy being the difference between an effective or non-effective shot, or a quarter inch. So I can pick an extra quarter inch and a little bit of kinetic energy, and that would mean that the projectile would have to be going sideways for that to really matter. Or I can pick something that has a higher probability of actually impacting my target. Gives me the best advantages to connecting. And I feel, everybody's different. Everybody's going to have a different take on this. I feel the advantages of having a higher probability of connecting with my target is way more worth just a little bit more kinetic energy, or if the bullet's going sideways, cutting a slightly larger wound cavity. That's my thoughts on it. I mean, you have to come into the decision yourself. Again, that's not a catch-all for me. Like, I don't run M193 in this rifle because it has a military sight. So I run M193 or M855 because it's calibrated to this sight. Now, ultimately, the M855A1 is as fast as the M193, but as long as the 262, so if they ever figure that shit out and get it so it stops destroying rifles, that's what I will ultimately switch to in every single one of my rifles. I'll change the sights if I have to or whatever, because that's a far superior round than either three of these. But again, they're having problems with it. It's the chewing up rifles. It's just not going very well. They will ultimately iron that out, and when they do, that's what I will switch to. For now, I will pick a higher probability of connecting with my target. 1 second. No. Alright, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, I will pick a cartridge that gives me a higher probability of connecting with my target, which I think is far more important than a cartridge that brings just a little bit more kinetic energy to the table and does slightly better when the round is sideways. Again, my thoughts, you have to decide what's right for you. M193 is right for me. Unless, of course, I have military sights, then I run 855, but you get the idea. So anyway, I hope this video had answered your question good enough, or like, if you have any more questions, just feel free to ask. That's what I'm getting to. If you like to help support the channel, I got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.